Maxime Vachier-Lagrave strikes back in game 3. It is an even match once more. And Danya, in their previous matchup in 2020, Magnus actually won the first 2 games, and Maxime still won the match. So an early deficit does not phase Maxime Vachier-Lagrave. He has proven that before, and maybe he'll prove it again.
And if you're Maxime, you basically, from a psychological standpoint, want to convince Magnus that this isn't just going to be a repeat of the Fabi match, right? You want Magnus to start thinking, hey, I'm actually in worse form today. This is actually going to be a much closer match. That's what I mentioned in the pre-show. You want to get under the world champion's skin. There's no better way to do that than to get off to the kind of start that he has indeed gotten off to. And Magnus continuing to play ambitiously in the opening, kind of a Marshall gambit. And let's see what he makes of this.
Let's see how that world championship match preparation pays off. What's going on? Rook takes d5. You're walking into a pin, but...
Oh my God. Oh, I remember this.
There's some e-file problem, right?
So if we bring up an analysis board, this is super instructive. Looks like rook d5 yields 2 pieces for rook. What could possibly be the idea? But look at the e-file, right? There's a weakness on e1, which black contests with queen e7. You have to drop your queen back to d1. And I'm pretty sure black just goes like rook fe8 or rook a e8, and you have no good way to defend e1. You have to bring your king up. And now the queen dips into h4. Whoop! Attacking h2. That was not a very good whoop. I apologize. And after h3, whoop! Queen f4, infiltrating now h2. G3, whoop! Queen e4, infiltrating h1. And black is now completely winning. Look at that line.
As you would say, by hook or by crook, that queen is getting in. There's nothing you can do. And, well, that would be a massive problem.
Look at this.
And, yeah, as you're finishing this line off, is winning material back. And the king is weak. And white's queenside hasn't developed. So look at this. Bishop d6, played by Magnus Carlsen. And Maxime is thinking. There's also bishop takes d5. We only talked about rook takes d5 there. He plays it. And now I think black has to play c6.
Yep.
He does that very quickly. And if bishop takes c6, you swap bishops and then take this rook on e5. That's the important point. A move ago, if you took on d5, the rook would simply capture back and white's ahead material. So you're trying to force this bishop onto another square so the rook on e5 does remain loose when all is said and done.
What do you make of that line? Is that a possibility for white to sack the exchange and then play d4 in the end, or does white's lack of development preclude that possibility? I guess it does. Maybe it was worth considering. MVL just says, hey, I'm up a pawn.
He's up a pawn. There's a bishop pair. White is underdeveloped over there on the queen side. But I like this position from a practical perspective for white. Like, you just develop your pieces. How is black going to prove that he has sufficient compensation for that pawn?
And there's a ticking clock here, literally and figuratively. If you let white play knight f1 and bishop f4, if you disappear the dark squared bishops, Robert, then Magnus is going to be worse positionally as well as being down a pawn. He's got to make something happen on the queen side, and that's precisely what he's trying to do with a5.
And you put that politely. He wouldn't be worse. He'd be lost. If those dark square bishops are off the board, you just pluck them off, knight b3 to c5, or really anything, because white is up a pawn and controls the squares. You could give one of your pawns back and still be positionally winning. So knight goes to f1. If queen e1, you stop white from developing because the bishop can't move. The rook on a1 is loose. Maybe queen e3. You mentioned queen g4, 30, bishop h6. That's pretty clever as well.
Yeah, I was thinking queen g4 because queen d7 is also a threat in that position.
Ooh.
Magnus definitely enticed by queen e1. He's thinking about it. Now, the typical way of getting the queen out is to play b3 and bishop b2, but that looks really, really awkward. Even if you do that, the queen drops back, and that bishop on b2 has reached basically a dead end. So let's see if Magnus takes up the gauntlet here with queen e1.
And queen e1 actually threatens bishop takes h2 check. Now, bishop h2 does not work right now. Your queen gets trapped. So it looks like you win a pawn, and you even things up with opposite-colored bishops. But after bishop takes h2, and we can just try to show that quickly on analysis board, and he's doing exactly what you said, bringing the queen up right back to e2. The queen gets trapped, funnily enough, on the f1 square.
Super instructive. All retreat squares are protected, and the b5 pawn precludes the queen from evacuating to b5 or a6. Instructive indeed. Back we go to the live board because the queens have been traded. He's played bishop b2, and rather than bringing his queen all the way back, Magnus trades queens. A lot of players, Robert, wouldn't do this because they're down a pawn, but Magnus believes that the activity of his rook and the pressure exerted by the queenside pawns fully compensates for the pawn. And moreover, I think black is just better here. I think MVL has misplayed this.
Bishop a6 to d3, a huge threat right now. And something that super grandmasters do is they'd rather be down a pawn with activity than equal on material and passive. So right now, Magnus is showcasing why that is. The bishop is going to slide to a new diagonal into the white position. The a2 pawn is always loose. The bishop b2 is really a pawn on b2. It's not really doing much of anything. And then black has no problems whatsoever across the board. So knight g3 is possible, but the rook can just slide over. He takes first on b4. At least he gets an open file, maybe something he can use as the game continues.
Yeah, tactically, he will try to get his rook to c1 if the bishop leaves b7. The issue is that even if it does, you always have bishop d6 to f8 covering a back rank check. So Magnus's next move is very obvious. You called it bishop a6, maybe bishop c8 to f5 is an alternative maneuver. MVL has to try to get this knight out, but at some point, he's going to have to smoke this rook. You can't survive for very long with a rook just sitting there on e2.
There's a very specific variation that, might be relevant, is that if bishop a6, perhaps the rook can slide to c1, because there's rook c6 hitting both bishops at once, and the back rank problems may keep white in the game. Now, that's easier said than done. It's a bit of a complicated line, but I'm just noting that those bishops would be on the same rank, so perhaps the rook can cause the bishop some trouble.
And perhaps given time, black should just make some luft, either h6 or king f8, not because of the threat of a back rank mate, but precisely because of the line that you indicated. Once the dark squared bishop is eliminated, the mate conversation is reopened. Knight g3 by Maxime, and now Magnus has to decide, whoa, I was not expecting that. Were you?
I think he's saying, let's just make a draw. I'm fine doing that. Maybe he didn't really believe in his... bishop a6?
Wait, bishop a6?
Wait, he's walking into trouble.
But then I guess you go back to g1, so you don't lose your bishop, but he missed it.
But bishop d3, rook c1, that's what I was saying earlier. The back rank checkmate saves white from losing a piece. But what if you just make a pawn move, like h5 or something?
h5, g6. And I think that's what Magnus is deciding. How do I want to make luft? h5 is good because it also restricts white's kingside, crippled kingside pawn structure.
Wow, bishop d3 is a threat, so the bishop will have to move from b2, and then you lose a2, and black is better. Magnus is not making a draw here. Maybe he thought that white was frozen no matter what. He plays this h5 move, and bishop c1, rook takes a2. This is not very pleasant unless white can attack the pawn on b4. That's the ultimate goal, is trading off b3, which is on the light square, for that b4 pawn on a dark square.
And if you try to close the mousetrap after rook takes a2 with bishop b2, again, there's bishop d3. It just shows how much of a liability the rook is when it's this passive. It's eminently attackable when it's on a light square. And I think MVL is just going to have to desperately get that bishop around, as you said, to d6.
Wait.
Once you eliminate this pawn, it's a draw.
Is there rook e1 check? Forcing king h2, and then playing rook d1. Can you go after the d4 pawn to get a passer?
Oh, and the bishop can't move. I'm going to have to go rook a1. I'm going to have to spend a tempo preparing bishop b2. And Robert, even if bishop b2 is played there, there's rook to d2. So exactly. I think that's a great idea. Let's show this on the ML. Check, king h2. Here, let's say I play rook a1. Now, do you take this pawn, or do you find an improving move?
Maybe king h7 just to show the point you were making before. Bishop b2, rook d2 is a problem.
Because you win f2, and then these other two pawns are going to be major weakness. Okay, we're having something very similar. Back we go to the live board. Magnus threw in the move bishop d3, and then he went rook e1 check, and g5, keeping the tension and expanding on the king side.
Wow. He's saying, go bishop b2. I have rook e2 back. The f2 pawn still falls, and the bishop is ready to slide into e4. This looks really tough for Maxime Vachier-Lagrave. He's also down on the clock, Danya. Magnus wins these games in classical chess, but in a blitz game, a bullet scramble impending, feels not very pleasant.
Yeah, and he eats these types of positions for breakfast. You won a game like this in the very first game. It was obviously a totally different structure, different pieces on the board, but similar nature of the position. He's slightly better. He's got some pressure, and he always manages to make something out of nothing. What's he thinking about? Is he thinking about taking and going bishop b1? That's got to be a draw, though, right?
Yeah, because the bishop might wrap around very quickly.
Bishop b1 immediately. That's not a good move because white can push a4.
That would be hilarious, though. But I see what you're saying. If they're swapping on a1, bishop b1, if the white bishop doesn't get to the b pawn in time, black simply gobbles up a2 and b3, has a passer of his own, and you see the evaluation bar saying that this is not winning for black. From an objective perspective, Magnus Carlsen is not winning this game, but he's good at posing problems, but he is a problem. He's down to 30 seconds.
He's frittered away his time advantage, and now MVL is the one 40 seconds up on the clock. I feel like rook e2 is a risk-free move. Worst comes to worst, you can just repeat with rook e1, and here comes Magnus. Rook takes f2, followed, I assume, by bishop e4.
He might throw an f6. I wonder if that's what he was calculating, but f6 would be up by king to g1. So he just plays bishop e4 right after the g2 pawn, rook g1, rook takes
bishop
a2,
e7.
Bishop e7. That's huge. But then black should go for the d4 pawn. What is critical to black's winning chances is creating a passed pawn of your own. You don't want symmetry. You don't want opposite colored bishops just shuffling. You want a passed pawn that you can push while you're hammering away the g2 pawn.
And that's the principle of two weaknesses. You're not going to win the game just by putting pressure on this pawn. White's capable of defending that pawn in a watertight manner with rook g1. What White's not capable of doing is defending that pawn and restraining a resurgent d-pawn at the same time. MVL sees that, and he's trying to find an alternative. Maybe the immediate bishop e7 should be considered, but in that case, the king could actually get checkmated pretty easily if it lands on h3.
Oh, he's going for it. Rook g2, king h3. It goes bishop g2 instead. That was a mistake, apparently.
What if just bishop takes b4? What's his follow-up?
I don't know.
He goes king g1 first. Best move.
He freezes the pawns, so a pawn can't push without dropping b3.
Check.
He's rook h2. He wins a2.
Don't miss rook h1.
Okay, king up. It's time for the black king to enter the party.
Major practical chances for black. Would you agree?
Oh, absolutely. King f5, king g4. It already looks scary. And now king f5 also does h4.
And he missed it. He missed it.
It's winning on the spot.
Basic. That is basic Betty right there. Now h3, and the pawn is unstoppable.
Yeah, king h4. The pawn remains defended. Don't go h2 because of rook h8 check. That's the one thing.
f6 maybe.
Oh, but bishop f6 check.
Oh, it's a check.
He goes king g4 now. Rook b2. He can just go out for the b pawn. And king. Oh, he wants king f3, so he goes bishop f5 first. Really important move.
Tightening the screws. Magnus is in no hurry. This pawn is eternally defended by the light-squared bishop. That is the bad part of opposite-colored bishops. You can't attack weaknesses that are on the color of the opposing side's bishop. And he's also playing for mate.
It's checkmate.
And he's going to deliver it.
That is a Magnus masterclass.